For over 100 years, the League of Women Voters has fought to protect the rights of eligible voters and expand access for those who've been left out of our democratic process. Our volunteers spearhead efforts to enact common sense voting reforms, and we are the first to fight back when voters' rights are threatened. We protect millions of voters every year through advocacy and education efforts, and we have been at the forefront of major voting rights court cases over the last decade. The League is nonpartisan and never supports or opposes candidates or parties. In 2018, the League of Women Voters of Michigan supported a ballot proposal called Promote the Vote. That ballot proposal was overwhelmingly supported by Michigan voters in November 2018 and made it easier for people to vote by including such features as same-day voter registration and no-reason absentee ballot voting. On September 8, 2021, a group called Secure My Vote went before the Michigan Board of Canvassers and requested their approval to start collecting signatures for a citizen-initiated law. This law includes a number of features that the League believes would make it harder for people to vote. The League of Women Voters does not support this initiative. Why does the League oppose this initiative? A citizen-initiated law is a way to pass the law that can circumvent the governor and avoid a vote of the people. So how does this process work? A draft proposal is submitted to the State Board of Canvassers. They will then approve the form and the summary. Petitioners will then circulate petitions to gather at least 340,047 valid signatures in 180 days. The Board of Canvassers validates the signatures. The proposed law is then sent to the legislature. They have 40 days to adopt it as law or to place on the ballot. This means the law can go into effect and the governor cannot veto it and you don't get to vote on it. So what's included in the law? There would be a new requirement to disclose the last 4 digits of your Social Security number on all new voter registrations. Currently, this is only required if you do not have a Michigan-issued driver's license or Michigan-issued state ID. It would impose a new requirement that voters applying for an absentee ballot must include their driver's license or state ID or the last 4 digits of their Social Security number. If this information is not included, only a provisional ballot will be provided, and the required ID must be presented to their local clerk within 6 days of the election. The inclusion of the last 4 digits of a Social Security number is currently required if a voter requests an absentee ballot from the Secretary of State. If a voter requests an absentee ballot directly from their clerk, they are not required to include this information. Instead, municipal clerks match the submitting signature against the signature on file for the voter. There are concerns that this will increase confusion, especially for people on the permanent absentee voter list, and result in more work for already busy clerks' offices. Many people on the permanent absentee voter list are elderly or disabled and may not have the transportation to the clerk's office in the required time frame to provide the necessary ID for their vote to be counted. This law would impose a new requirement that clerk's offices must be open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. for the 5 weekdays leading up to the election to accept ballots, or that drop boxes be made available for return ballots. What does this law change? The proposed law would restrict the options for registered voters to verify their identity on Election Day. The currently acceptable forms of ID are a Michigan driver's license or Michigan state-issued ID card, a driver's license or personal identification card issued by another state, a federal or state government issued photo identification, a U.S. passport, a military ID with photo, a student identification card with photo from a high school or accredited institution of higher learning, a tribal identification card with photo. Your ID does not need to include your address. But if you forgot your ID, can you still vote? Yes, you can. Currently, for no photo ID voters, Michigan law allows voters to sign an affidavit affirming their identity, and if their names are in the qualified voter file, they can vote. The penalties for providing false information on this form include up to a $1,000 fine or up to 5 years in jail. The Secure My Vote proposed law would remove this affidavit option. Instead, a no photo ID voter would only get a provisional ballot, and voters would then have 6 days to go to the clerk's office and provide their ID for their vote to count. Only 7 other states have this level of voter ID requirement. In the 2020 election, only 11,400 people used the affidavit option, less than 1% of all voters. But it was used in 82 of Michigan's 83 counties, according to Bridge Magazine. This would most likely impact non-drivers, disabled people, elderly people, and minority communities. There have been no documented cases of in-person voting fraud in Michigan. The proposed law would change the following. It would prohibit election officials from sending or providing absentee ballot applications unless asked. In 2020, Michigan's Secretary of State mailed absentee ballot applications to all Michigan voters, a pandemic-related decision upheld by federal courts. There is concern that the law could be interpreted to mean that municipal clerks could not even post the absentee ballot form on their website for voters to download and return. The initiative would not prohibit political parties, special interests, or advocacy groups from sending absentee ballot applications, only government officials. The proposed law would ban charitable contributions, including volunteer time, to help administer elections. In 2020, officials in 465 Michigan cities, townships, and counties applied for and received COVID-19 response grants from CTCL, a Chicago-based nonprofit that distributed funds nationally after getting $400 million in contributions from Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg. The grants went to Republican and Democratic clerks alike. The law would ban state and local clerks from applying for these types of grants. Many churches are kind enough to donate their space for polling places, costing them money in terms of additional utilities and cleaning. This law could potentially prevent your church from participating in elections, thus reducing the number of polling places and potentially increasing lines at remaining polling places. Although poll workers are paid for their time, many municipal clerks have welcomed the help of volunteers to conduct minor election-related activities. This would not be allowed under the new law. The proposed law would still require that ballot drop boxes to be closed at 8 p.m. on Election Day. And lastly, the law would appropriate $3 million to help provide free photo identification for those who declare a need, but only for 1 year. This new appropriation allows the legislature to adopt this legislation without a vote of the people, and it blocks a people's referendum vote after adoption. Although this initiative includes some positive or neutral aspects, overall, the League believes this law is not needed and will negatively impact voters, and we oppose this law.